since in March 2016, so last year, I then changed to the APEX development team, working on components like the calendar in APEX 5.1 or data loading. And in the current release cycle, my focus is to work on REST support, about which I will tell you a bit more in the afternoon. Perhaps a little bit also in that talk when we are talking about APEX 5.2 new stuff, but we will focus on that. I think we will do this rather shortly in the morning and do a bit more detailed in the afternoon. So again, this I'm pretty sure you have seen that safe harbor slide in almost every presentation, exactly from IT companies. Baseline is we are talking about future development. As of today, it's really probable that you will see the things I'm showing you also in the end product, but it's still in development. It might change. And at the end of the day, when the next version will be released, it might, of course, always turn out that this was nothing but a dream you have heard here. So but I think that's not only true for Oracle, that's true for every IT presentation at least. So what do we have about latest versions? APEX 5.1 is the latest APEX release. We all know this. Of course, there is in APEX we have releases and we have patch sets. And something new about APEX patch sets, and I think that's good news for you who are managing an APEX instance. If you're responsible for updating, patching, and maintaining that APEX instance, that the patch sets since March or since the 5.1 cycle, our plan is to deliver patch sets in a regular manner. So in the past, if you have experience with applying APEX patch set, how was this? There was an APEX release like 5.0 back in 2015, and then 6 months, 7 months, or sometime later, there was the first patch set. Then another time later, there was the second patch set. So the policy, how we brought out a patch set, was more or less, okay, let's see how it develops, and so to say, when we have enough content within a patch set, it's time to release. And the plan is to change this, and we already followed this plan for the last 2 patch sets. The plan is to deliver an APEX patch sets every 3 months. So you have seen this for 5.1, the end of March. We had 5.1.1 and the end of June. That's this one, 5.1.2. And yes, the next patch set, 5.1.3, will be there around the end of September, so roughly in a month's time. So this might be plus minus a week. We can't always guarantee the exact release date, but roughly we will focus on following that 3 months time frame. And patch sets in APEX, and in the past we most often stuck to that rule. Patch sets don't contain new features typically. In the past, we sometimes had a new packaged app within a patch set, but you won't see a major new APEX feature within a patch set. So these are really there for fixing bugs. So my recommendation for you is when there is a new patch set and you now know, okay, Oracle will release these in a 3-month cycle, and my recommendation to you would be apply these patch sets rather quickly. It doesn't have to be in the first week, but you also might not want to wait half a year before going on the first patch set. So it's 3-month cycles, so the idea is that you might apply these patch sets in, let's say, 4 weeks after their release, right? So that your environment is always stable and safe. Security fixes for APEX, when there are security fixes, are typically delivered over the patch set vehicle. So when there is something we have to fix, the fix will be contained in the next patch set. And then, so to make your environment up to date, it's a recommendation to really follow these patch sets and to apply them on time. So when it's about the general development direction, for years already we publish a statement of direction, and for those who are not here today, you can always read in that statement of direction what are the areas we are working on. So who of you already knows about that document statement of direction we have in OTN? Is that? So if you're interested, and we have this for years, I think we even had the statement of direction for APEX 4 and APEX 3 version. I'm sure for 4 versions, and I think we already had them for the APEX 3.x versions. So whenever a few months after an APEX version has been released, we update that document as soon as we got clear for the development direction to ourselves, as soon as we ourselves know, okay, that will be our direction for the next release, then we typically go ahead and update that document to give you the information what will be the development direction for the next APEX release. You don't find detailed information about features here. It's just the general direction, where is this product going to. So in that version, the current version, you will find that we are planning to have better support for REST, remote SQL data sources that we plan on to improve, interactive grid, that we plan on extend jet charts, that we plan on upgrading the JavaScript and jQuery libraries, so the rough development areas are covered there. So always a good link to bookmark. So you won't need it that often, but whenever, once a year, it's good to have a look into that. Okay, a few words about the community. Who of you is already registered or does know apex.world, this web page? Which is a pretty interesting web page. It's not done by Oracle. It's also not done by any of the official Oracle user groups. It's really a page from the community for the community. So one guy from Germany, Jürgen Schuster, and a few others from the US and from Europe came together and started to launch that community site. It has it has a plugin repository. It has at the homepage there is some news. There is a Slack discussion forum. So a lot of opportunity to get involved with the rest of the Application Express community. Also a good opportunity to post a question. So you actually have 2 ways to get help. If you really have a technical question and don't really know, okay, what to do now, there is the OTN discussion forum, and as an alternative, you might also use Apex World and the Slack channel on Apex World. The Slack channel is a bit more like chat, so it might even be a bit more responsive and immediate than the OTN forum. But I think the quality of the answers doesn't differ very much. You get good answers on the OTN forums, and you will get good answers over here. Just 2 alternatives: if you're looking for a job, or if you have a job post open, you might register here and then use that page to get a candidate for your job or to find something. So if you haven't looked into that page, it's http://apex.world, and always worth having a few minutes to look into it. And there is more of apex.world. I already mentioned the OTN discussion forum, which is, as far as I know, the most active forum in OTN. When you think about that, this forum is specific to the APEX component. So you can't compare this to the database forum, of course. Database is everything, right? And when I think about that this forum is just about APEX, it's a really large one. Then the APEX community is known for being very active on Twitter. So if you are on Twitter, follow the RCL Apex hashtag to always be up to date. Also, OracleDB is a good hashtag to get database new. Oracle Orts is a good hashtag to follow the news about Oracle REST Data Service or Apex Listener. There is a LinkedIn group, there's a Facebook group, and of course there is numerous blogs. If I wanted to list all the blogs which are there about Apex, I would need 4 or 5 slides just to list them all up. So, and if you can't remember this tomorrow, which I absolutely understand, you just have to memorize this one: apex.oracle.com/community, and there is an overview on all that, right? So also an interesting site to have a look into is this one. This exists for a year or so. It's called Build with Apex, and if if it contains just an overview of public-facing internet sites which are based on Application Express. It contains real production company representations or applications, but also some marketing sites. There are also some tutorial sites, but it's pretty a good collection here. And if you have a public-facing APEX application, then you might register it there as well. Okay, let's now get a little bit into the product itself. And before going to what will be new in APEX 5.2, I would like to focus a little bit on the current release APEX 5.1 and just pick a few features which are not typically in the focus of conference presentations and web sessions, just to give you a heads up, hey, this is also there. And I would like to use packaged applications as a hook to get into these. Who of you has installed a packaged application already so far? Oh, that's good. In Finland, it was much less. Who of you has really looked into a packaged application and got some content, some useful content out of it for your own development? Very good, very good. So I would like, for those who don't have played with packaged applications before, I would like to just lose a few words about this. And you see packaged apps when you click on packaged apps, of course, what else? And packaged apps divides itself into two parts. So you have, when you click on packaged apps, you see them all at once. Then you can divide between productivity apps and sample apps. And sample apps is more or less everything which has a sample as part of its title. And the sample apps are there for illustrating things. Those applications doesn't serve a specific purpose, right? Nobody needs a sample data loading application in your enterprise. It's just there to showcase how, in that case, data loading is being used. So this sample data loading page contains the data loading wizard, for instance, and then you see a report to review the uploaded data. And you can look into that. You can open Page Designer, see how these pages have been created, and then get some knowledge for your own application, how to do this yourself. Sample data loading is a pretty simple one. More interesting is for instance, the sample interactive grids application. And if you are playing with interactive grid, if you are looking how to use interactive grid, that application might be really interesting to play with. And a sample application, after you have installed it, is always unlocked, so it doesn't. When you look into it, it doesn't really. It's not much different from any other application. It has an icon by default, okay, and when you go into it, it's just a normal application. And for instance, that sample interactive grid application contains numerous use cases about interactive grid. So you log in your workspace credentials. So, and then you see several use cases what you could do with interactive grid. So here is a reporting part. So, and then you see, okay, let's start very simple, which is a basic reporting. So more or less an interactive grid based on select star from AMP and just showing data, what you could do with an interactive report as well. That's a simple example. Some explanatory text. And then if you want to see how this actually has been done, you could go into Page Designer. Let me enlarge this a bit. And then see, okay, here's my interactive grid. Okay, this is done based on a SQL query. And could review the attributes, what has been done to get exactly that interactive grid. And then the examples continue. We will have column groups, again, an explanatory text, and you will see here the columns have been grouped into identity, nodes, and compensation groups. And again, in Page Designer, I can review how that has been done. So chart view, for instance, to see how charts are integrated into interactive grid. And there is then several pagination examples. Interactive grid, like interactive reports, provides different ways to do pagination. You see them all listed. So there's the traditional ones and the ones which are only available within interactive grids. So the progressive scroll, for instance, which, as you scroll down, as soon as you come close to the bottom, like you know it on Twitter, Facebook, or any other page, as you scroll down, as soon as you get close to the button, it reloads data in the background. So you have some sort of, here it is called progressive scroll, others call it infinite scrolling. So it's more or less, the list gets longer and longer, and you don't have to click pagination buttons. That scheme is only available within interactive grid. Another one is the load more. So that is, which is not that cool as the progressive scroll, but the pagination scheme, it pretty much depends on your use case, what you really need, right? Very interesting is the Oracle text example. And I didn't install the text application since yesterday. So when you install that application on your system, and you look into and you get into the Oracle text part, you will see just an error message telling you Oracle text is not available. So I'm pretty sure that in all of your databases, Oracle text is available. That's an absolute exception that it doesn't work. But the thing is, only Oracle text, to use Oracle text, you need a special role, the CTX app role, and the application then tells you, hey, have your DBA grant the CTX app role to your parsing schema. You do this, and then it will tell you, hey, now here's a button, build the text index. And as soon as you have done this, you will see the picture we have here. And who has ever worked with Oracle text? Okay, who have never heard about it? Okay, so Oracle text is really cool functionality in the Oracle database. It's there for 20 years now, right? The first implementations of Oracle text was the context cartridges. That goes back to the 90s, right? So it's available in every database. It's available in all editions of your database, so you don't have to license something separately. It's just there, right? And interactive grid has a very nice integration with Oracle text, and that's something which hasn't been talked too much about so far, and I would like to take this opportunity to give you that impression, because I think it's such a typical use case in every company. Oracle text, the cool thing about Oracle text is, so what is it? It's a full text engine, a full text indexing engine, a full text indexing and retrieval engine. So the initial idea behind Oracle text was that you store documents in your database as CLOBs or BLOBs, then you index them, and then you do text retrieval. And now that's still a valid use case, but you can also use Oracle text to index plain relational contents. So you have to configure the text index a bit differently, and then you can say Oracle text calls this a multi-column data store, and then it indexes all the columns of a table, all the columns of a table you specify. So in that example, I think we index the name and the country columns. So, and then Oracle text treats this data like documents. So we can use the same features which are available for documents on the data. And for a typical business scenario, there's one Oracle text feature which is sort of a killer feature, and that is fuzzy searching. You don't have any fuzzy search in SQL. We have the soundex function, but we all know what the soundex function is useful. I think for Swedish it's as useful as for German. 0, right, because it has English logic in it. And as soon as you propose that to your customers, you might not get that feedback that you like, right? But fuzzy is language independent. it just finds matches based on similarity. So a similar result based on the fuzzy search might sound different, but it's when just comparing the letters, it's pretty close, right? And a typical example, which I like to use, so John has provided this table of popular names. So you see this is Galileo Galilei, Ludwig van Beethoven, and all the other popular names from history. And one is Gustav Eiffel, you know, the guy who designed the Eiffel Tower. And in Germany, there's also a region which is called the Eifel. So every German knows how to write Eiffel, but the region is spelled with only one F. So every German who types Gustav Eiffel types Eiffel with one F at the first glance. So it's typical, it's not bad. So in the second example, it works already. But this is just an example. I can tell from personal experience with all of our names, it works the same, right? Somebody looks for a customer name and it's spelled wrong. So let's try it here. Right, I looked for Eiffel with one F and I got the Gustav Eiffel with 2F, right? Even if we look for, let me see, I haven't tried this. No, that's not very, it also works with Gustav with an F, and Oracle text says, okay, that's similar. It's not a soundex function. By accident, this always also sounds the same, right? But it's just a similarity based on the letters. So, and when we look into this, how is this implemented? And those of you who have experience with Oracle text know typically you can integrate Oracle text with APEX very easily, right? If you build the text index, and then there is a special SQL function which is called contains, and then you build a report using that SQL function. You have an item, an APEX item on top where to enter the search terms, and then after an hour of working, you have everything in place. And with interactive grid makes this really easy. So we have here the normal interactive grid. And what we now have in the attributes section, there is also this, this Oracle text index column property. And interactive grid just wants to know, do you have an Oracle text index and which table column has actually been indexed? You specify that column and then you are done. Oracle text does the SQL with the contains for you automatically. So, and then there is one additional thing which is interesting to know. In the component setting, we have, and you might have seen that already when visiting the component settings for interactive grid. There is you are able to set Oracle text PL/SQL function name, whatever that means. So those who have worked with Oracle text know that there is a documentation for Oracle text, and then there are several pages for the query syntax. You know, Google also has a query syntax. You can type in URL, colon, and all this kind of stuff to perform special Google searches. Oracle text has the same. So you can have a very complex syntax how to formulate a query with Oracle text, and you can read documentation, but you don't want to have your end users building these queries. For your end users, you want to provide a simplified query syntax. And that function is a function which is implemented by you, and which converts the end user queries into an Oracle text query syntax. So you can switch on or switch off features for your end user. If you want to have the wildcard as a star, just replace the star with a %. If you want to have the %, leave it as it is. If you want to have fuzzy by default, just prepend the question mark by default, so you can prepare the user input, the end user input, however you want, and then let Oracle text do what you want it to do, right? And if you don't have such a query, the end user input is directly passed to Oracle text. So then the end user can type text queries directly. So I think this is a very nice integration of Oracle technology into an application express component, and it allows you to make immediate use of a component which I think is totally underestimated in the Oracle database. So a database, when we have stored our business data into our database, and the key requirement to our applications is to find that data, that end users are able to find data, to find the data they are interested in. And Oracle Text simply makes that easy by providing these fuzzy search capabilities. And you can have that in your APEX applications just with a few settings. Okay, so that's one thing I wanted to emphasize. That's the Oracle Text. I won't, what's that? Interesting. I won't get to all this other stuff of this application. So it's a pretty large sample applications with lots of interactive grid examples. Also very worthwhile to invest a bit of time into looking around what's possible with the interactive grid. Another application which I like to show you is the packaged application. Is the sample charts app. Who of you has already looked into sample charts? Well, only a few. So let's install it here. And you see how a packaged app is installed. Pretty straightforward. The sample charts app is also available on apex.oracle.com, since it's read only. So you just say apex.oracle.com/charts, and this is a pre-installed version of the sample charts application. The disadvantage of that one is, of course, there is no developer toolbar. You can't look into it. So there is a cool chart, and then, of course, you want to know how is this built, right? And that's not possible on apex.oracle.com. It's possible in your own workspace, of course, but this is one copy for all of us, and so, of course, this is viewing only. That's the reason why I installed it here. And again, we can start the application and see what's possible. So all combinations or possibilities with the new JET charts are contained here. So for instance, JET provides some bubble chart capability, which APEX didn't provide pre 5.1 out of the box. And when thinking about the bubble chart, many people think about the D3 bubble charts, which are also pretty popular, but which work different. You see, the APEX bubble chart is there is an X and a Y axis, and the bubble position is based on the X and the Y axis, and the size of the bubble is also determined by the data. So when you look into the internet, you typically often see bubble charts like this, right? The bubble size is determined by the data, but the position is just made up by the chart. So it starts in the middle and then it circles outside, right? That's also, it's a very popular way of visualizing data. The JET bubble charts don't work that way, and that's the reason why the free bubble chart plugin is still there. So if you need that kind of bubble chart, you might use the plugin, which is part of the sample applications, and add that to your own APEX application. So that's the reason we drastically reduced the number of the free plugins in APEX 5.1. So when you compare it to APEX 5.0, APEX 5.0 also had a sample charts application, and in APEX 5.0 it contained much more D3 plugins. But for those cases where we can achieve the same with JET charts, we drop the D3 plugins, and only those plugins are left whose functionality cannot be replicated with JET at this time, right? I think in the long run we will replace all these plugins with JET. So and then again you see several. Let's go back to the bubble charts to just show you how this is done. Again, you can have a look into the page, and you see the JET chart region over here. You see there is a series. Here is the SQL query which provides the data, and here is the access definitions, the chart attributes, and you can look up all information you need to replicate that in your own requirement. And the free bubble chart plugin is also here. There's the SQL query and the attributes, and within the plugins section of that applications, you see those plugins which are still there. As I said, it was more than in 5.0, and the reason why some plugins have been removed is just because Jet does the same. It's out-of-the-box functionality in Apex in the meantime. So that's the sample applications are also very good sources for plugins for that. So the interactive grid sample application also contains a plugin. It contains a plugin for an item type plugin for interactive grid. So if you want to have editing capabilities, and it's just enable it in interactive grid, and interactive grid supports plugins for the item types. So in interactive grid, you can not only use select lists and text fields and date pickers and so on, you can really use all item types, and you can also use plugins. For a plugin to work with interactive grid, the plugin developer has to do a bit, right? A plain Apex 5.0 plugin won't work with interactive grid because some intelligence is missing, right? And interactive grid contains one plugin example which is able to work with interactive grid, and which you can use as a blueprint to build your own plugins. Okay, so these were two sample applications. Looking at the time, I think I will leave the other sample applications to your investigation. So it's really, for those who didn't use packaged applications so far, it's also a recommendation, have a look into it, especially the sample charts application. So all of us have to integrate charts into our applications. It's daily business, and the sample charts application really gives you an impression of what's possible with Application Express. Which capabilities do I have out of the box? And it's always important to be aware what can Apex do out of the box, so that I don't have to look for a plugin or have to look for some complex SQL query which I have to work half a day on, and after I have crafted this super intelligent SQL query, then a colleague says, oh, it's nice, but have you seen that out-of-the-box functionality? You just need to select star from table for that. And then there's the moment where you say, that was totally wasted time. So always good to know, to have an overview what Apex provides out of the box. And the packaged apps and the sample app are a very good vehicle for that, just to always know what does Apex provide me without doing anything. When starting with coding, we can do whatever we want. Okay, so I will skip the sample calendar app today. Let's then, no. Continue. So that's so let's now move to the new directions in Apex 5.2. What are we currently working on? And I have brought in a narrow sense so that's 3 major new features we are working on, and the other ones are smaller new features. So jet charts, for instance, was the new feature in Apex 5.1, and of course this will be improved in Apex 5.2. We will see a few more chart types, but it will be from the component from jet charts, it will be more or less the same as in Apex 5.1. More charts, of course, improved old charts, but there will that's it, more or less. So what's really new, something in which hasn't been there before, is the new create application wizard, or the blueprint wizard to create application, which I will show you next, and the capability to create Apex components on top of remote data sources, which is really something new when we think about how Apex works and which data Apex typically displays and on which data Apex typically works. And we will see a direction change. So Apex, Apex runs in the Oracle database. So what data does Apex work on? The data in the database. What else, right? And what do Apex components do? Apex components execute SQL. And we will see with Apex 5.2, we will be able to execute SQL against a remote database without using a database link. With a database link, we can use that today. That's boring, right? And but we have seen many cases where database links are either just not possible. Think about that everybody's talking about cloud computing, and think about that you have a database instance in the cloud, or at least it doesn't have to be the cloud. Think about at least some other section of your data center where you don't get a SQLnet connection to. Then typically you are out with database links, right? And these situations are more and more common. The remote SQL data access might be a way to deal with these situations, to get access to remote data even without a database link. But let's first have a look into the blueprint applications or the new Create Application Wizard. This is not only available on my development system here, this is also available on apex.oracle.com. So a pre-release of the Create Application Wizard is available in your apex.oracle.com workspace at your fingertips, and you can try it out today or tomorrow and play with it. So you go to Application Builder, click on Create, and you will, now that's apex.oracle.com. You will see that picture. Who notes the difference? Subtle, right? But it says, normally it said desktop, mobile, web sheet, packaged application. And now it says blueprint, desktop, mobile, web sheet, packaged application has been removed. We removed it here because it's so easy to install a packaged app by clicking there. So that's not much of a loss. And we gained space to add the blueprint icon. In the final 5.2 release, this will most probably again change a bit because of the mobile interface, which I will talk later on. So then let's create a blueprint application. And what you see on apex.oracle.com is also that's a version which reflects the current development state. So on my development system, it's even a bit more advanced. That is one version we wrapped up for usage on apex.oracle.com. Not everything what we currently have in development is already contained, but this one is something in a state which is good, that you can start playing with it, that you can gain your experiences. So, and you see it is a completely different layout. When you think about the old Create Application Wizard, there was not really much you could do without it. And me personally, when I created an Apex application, what did I do? I said Create Application, Desktop. I added one page and said Create Application. That was my work with the Create Application Wizard. Who did the same? Most of you, right? There was the ability to create, to add more pages and then hit Create Applications. Most customers I talk to never use that, because when you create the application, either you don't have the idea, and otherwise it's not much of, it doesn't save much effort to add that interactive report. Those things which really save time, because they require a lot of work afterwards, those weren't contained in the Create Application Wizard anyway. And that's the thing the new Create Application Wizard changes. So it still provides the ability to add multiple pages at once, but it's not just simple regions. Those pages can do more. So let's add a page. Right, and when we have a look, it's even a dashboard page, right, which wasn't available so far. So, and that dashboard page allows up to 4 charts, and you can see here it says table of view sample data. So it even allows just to not provide. I just want to see how a dashboard pages does in my application. Nothing more, just quick, right? And then let's add this. So then we can have another one. Let's add, what I like is the master detail wizard. Let's use the depth table. What else? So we have a primary display column, a secondary display column. I choose the name and log. What else? And the detail table is the emp table. And we don't have a detail table 2, at least now. So, and then we have some advanced option. This is the page help. Oh, page name is a good idea. And we want to have an icon as well. So we have a master detail. So, and here is, and so we can add pages to this. So the interesting bit is then the area below the pages. And that is some, I like to call it some side features, right? It's not when you think about theme style selection, right? That's something, and the idea actually comes from packaged apps development, because all packaged apps have some pages for selecting theme styles. And of course, what did we learn during this? That we are developing the same pages over and over again. And the idea was, okay, if we are doing this, you might be doing the same, right? You have also some infrastructure work within your applications, which you have to do for every application. So you might also have pages which you are developing over and over again. You create a new application, so we always have a specific page to add, and you are doing the same mouse clicks over and over again. So we have these features you can enable for your application. You can also select all of them to see what this Create Application Wizard does, by the way. So there's, for instance, one for the theme style selection that an application administrator or even the end user can switch their theme style. By the way, this was also a new feature in 5.1. That end users can change the theme style. So by default, you have universal theme and the blue look and feel, and your end users can decide, oh no, I want to have the red one, right? That's possible with APEX 5.1. We also have tutorials which describe how to implement that. It's not that hard, but here you get it with just the mouse clicks. And there is application settings, so there is help pages, so typical things which are useful in an application and which you don't want to provide over and over again. So what you now can do, and that's where the name Blueprint actually comes from, is you can review a JSON representation of your settings over here. Right, so you see that's the features. So that's just a JSON representation of that what I clicked in my wizard. And if you wish, we can then you can edit that JSON only if you wish. And if you need 10 dashboard pages, for instance, you just copy that section with the dashboard and then hit Apply Blueprint. Right. Also, APEX stores all the blueprints. I'm not sure how many of you really want to fiddle in the JSON, but APEX also stores all the blueprints. So yesterday I created an application as well. That was in Finland. So, and if I now think, I would like to build the same application again, I just hit load, and then I get my settings from yesterday back. So the idea is that you can have your blueprint applications, your application templates. You create an application template, and then this is automatically stored as a blueprint, and you can reuse it over and over again. And if you then notice, I missed something in my template, you just load the blueprint, change the settings, and create another application, and again a blueprint is stored. So you really, when you are in that head start situation, you just want to get something to start building, then this can do much more than the previous application wizard was able to. So, but now we clicked on this and we want to have it. We have an application. So we can have the final settings here. We can adjust the language. We can set user interface defaults. Right. There is the Create Application Wizard allows to configure a lot of details in that application blueprint to save that and to get you into that head start situation. So, and now let's simply finally create that application. nice progress bar we have as well. So, and you see, it takes a few seconds to actually creating that, but we will now see why it took 15 seconds or so. It actually did a lot of work, right? Rows per page, here we go. It created 42 pages, just based on the settings I made for that blueprint. And now let's start the application. So we have the dashboard page, which is just, as I said, just based on some sample data, and we see, okay, a dashboard in Apex might look like this. And then next step, you immediately see, okay, that's a line, an area, bar at the pie chart, and then of course the next step is go into that page and replace the sample data with your own tables, right? And you really have some sort of a visual approach to build your applications. We have the master detail, which I have created, which is an interesting kind of a master detail, an alternative. So we have this sidebar, which represents the master, and we have the report to present the details, and of course an edit page to make changes to the detail rows. Now it's all done with a few mouse clicks, right? So you actually now have two alternatives, two modern alternatives for master detail. You can use the interactive grid approach, which is connecting two interactive grids, which is pretty business-like, right? And that's a bit, some people might say, a bit cleaner layout, not that much grids with some sidebar and the details over here, which might be more appropriate for specific use cases. So you can use actually both. And here are the administration pages the Create Application Wizard has created, and that is the various configuration options for your application. So we can even now, if we don't want to have it, we can enable or disable the theme selector for end users. So let's first have a look into the theme style selections for those who haven't seen this before. So the default desktop style is Vita, which is that blue layout. And this is the new APEX5.1 feature, allow end users to choose theme style. So let me enable this. So and now all users get this customized link over here. And you can have that even without Create Application Wizard. So to enable it in an existing application, just go to Shared Components, to the user interface, and you see the user interface definition, there is the setting, allow end users to choose theme style. So as soon as that is enabled, end users get this customized link over there. And if they click it, they don't have to be an application administrator. Every end user gets this, and they can now choose, okay, I don't like the Vita, I want to have the red style. So, and when this is changed, the red style only applies to that very application user. So all other users logging into that application still see the default style until they change to their personal preference. Make sense? Okay, so and when going back, and perhaps and that's one of the ideas of the blueprint application. So let's try another one. We open that wizard again, and let's now imagine that was pretty good, pretty okay, but not that what I want. So we can then load the blueprint, and that's the one from this morning. So I'm back just in the moment before I hit the Create Application button, and now I can change this. Right, notifications, I don't need this. Oh, I don't need this. Add some other page, and Let's add a calendar, for instance. And at that page, create an application again. Look how that works. So the idea behind that create application wizard is a bit different. It's not just creating an application and then just staying in that one. So the idea here is for those typical standard cases. So it's not there for your application, which has this highly sophisticated pure SQL logic, which has the reports with the complex SQL, which are linked to other pages where you have implemented drill down and things like that. So the application with all your intelligence in it, it's not built for that. But as we all Apex developers know, that's only one part of the work. The other part of the work is where we have to do the same stuff over and over again. There is a table, make that available on the internet or the intranet. Okay, so what we are doing, create an application, add an interactive report, refine that interactive report, send the link to the application around. Then we need to visualize some data as a chart, create the application, build the chart, send the link around. So the typical stuff we do over and over again. And for those cases, it's now very easy to just create a blueprint and create applications over and over again. Creating an application becomes much more cheaper with APEX5.2, and it's after creating the application, your jump start, your head start is able to do much more than it was before, right? And that's the idea and the usage scenario for that kind of application. Make sense? Who has tried this before already? Somebody? No, at least two. Okay. So all the others, log to apex.oracle.com. Right tomorrow, try it out. And if you wish, there is the OTN forum. We are still and always interested in your feedback. So if there is something you absolutely don't like, tell us. If there is something you like, tell us. We are interested in your features, in your feedback. Okay. Yeah?
Is it possible for a whole application to get the JSON format?
For an existing whole application?
Yes.
No, not so far. Okay. That's on the roadmap to get into that area, because you are pretty much with that JSON, you are pretty much in that what we want to have for years. You will get an API for your application, right? And that's, I don't think that we will manage this for 5.2. It will take some time if we get into that situation.
It would also open up the ability to do comparison in a very easy way, because there's a lot of JSON compare tools out there.
Exactly. So there's a lot of potential in that JSON functionality. Actually, we had the same discussions 5 years ago when we have the same discussions. Not only 5, we have them for years. Yeah? And it's very reasonable and understandable. And I would like to have it as well. Actually, to have a pure SQL API for Application Express, which would allow to create applications programmatically. We don't have it so far. It's also not on the immediate roadmap for 5.2. We are working on this. Maybe that's a direction for this, but it's too early to say something about this. So we will have to see. For now, for 5.2, it's just blueprint. So those things you are configuring with the create application wizard, those are reflected in the JSON. And so the JSON reflects the blueprint, the jump start for your application. But as soon as you then, with Page Designer, do further changes in your application, those won't be reflected in the JSON anymore. It's just the blueprint, just the jump start. Yes? Okay, so move on. No, not that one. That was the Create Application Wizard. And we will talk about REST more detail in the afternoon, as I already said, but REST is, and the remote SQL features are very closely related to each other. So we have to talk about the infrastructure for this now. So to be able, so the idea is for 5.2, as I said, we want to be able to not only access local data in the database with SQL, with Apex components. So for instance, a classic report or an interactive report, it's Since the very first day of Application Express, we know how it works. The component is driven by a SQL statement. The SQL statement is being executed in the local database in the parsing schema, and then the data is being processed by APEX. That's the way how it works since the very first days. And what we learned during the last years is that customers, and you can see this in the forums as well, that customers are more and more asking, oh, we have a REST service over there, and we want to consume that in APEX. We have, as I outlined before, we have another Oracle database, and we can't create a database link, but we want to access the data. And so when the plan for 5.2 is to be able to work on such foreign data sources, on such remote data sources, and to do that, an APEX application cannot just fire SQL anymore, right? Or an APEX component. So when you have a component, a chart, a plugin, or whatever, when the data source is remote, the component cannot just fire a SQL. That only works locally. So we had to do something inside Application Express to create an infrastructure where components can get data from. And so this is the new structured data source instance infrastructure. Let's see how this looks like in Page Designer. So it's rather unspectacular. So that's let's look into another application. This one. Let me create a new page. And then we can have a look what that means. So I have a blank page. Page Designer is open. And now I'm adding a classic report to that page. So, and when we now look into that classic report, the interesting stuff is over here, right? You don't see SQL query anymore, right? It says location, which is local database, remote database, or web source. Web source is more or less web service, right? But we wanted to have a term which is separate from the existing web services. So that's the location. So then let's have another look. The type is table view, SQL query, or PL/SQL function body returning SQL query. So we really have structured this now. If you now that's a few of the tiny differences. So when you in the future will create a form or a report based on a table, APEX will maintain that information. So far, when you have the wizard and create a report on a table, what does APEX do? At the end of the day, you have a report on top on a SQL query, and the SQL query is select star from table. In the future, we will maintain that. It will still, even after creating the component, APEX will still know that was a report based on a table. That's just a subtle difference, but a bit more clarity than it was before. PL/SQL function returning SQL query is also something we now have in a structured manner. So all components which are moved to that new infrastructure will be able to be powered by a PL/SQL function body returning SQL query. And here comes the side effect. We didn't plan this actually, but as a side effect, you will be able to have an interactive report based on a PL/SQL function returning SQL query, which wasn't possible before. That's just a side effect. We never planned for this, but while we introduced this, we thought, hey, that's now possible. That is cool. But of course, your PL/SQL function, we want that the PL/SQL function still has to return a stable set of columns for an interactive report. So it's not like in classic reports where you can return whatever you want, right? It's still some constraints, but you will be able to have an interactive report with a dynamic where clause, for instance, which is very interesting, right? So when it's table or view, we can choose the parsing schema or a different schema, have the table name. We can choose SQL query, and then it more or less looks as before. And the interesting bit is now to use a remote database. That's where the fun is. And a remote database will be based on ORDs. And with the upcoming version of ORTS, so the latest version of ORTS 3.0.11, which you can download today, does have this feature technically, but it's not exposed. That's the reason why I'm using it. Chris told me the magic parameter to enable, and the next version it will be documented and exposed. So the guys were just wrapping this feature up. And that feature I'm talking about is they call it ad hoc SQL runner. And it is an ability to run every SQL statement over REST. So let me show you how this works. And I will open a REST client for that. Yeah, and that then 01 BPJ something is my machine within the Oracle network. Am I connected to the Oracle network? Yeah. And that ortscott_SQL points to the ad hoc remote SQL runner. So I think the authorization should be set already. And there is a JSON syntax, and that JSON syntax will be documented. With that ad hoc SQL runner, I will be able to execute a post request. So this comes as a RESTful service. ORTS provides a standardized RESTful service. I can post request to that RESTful service, and the request body contains one or more SQL statements. So when I now send this, and I hope the instance is running, I'm lucky. Come on. Hard to read, right? So I think the details are not that important. So what ORTS returns and is a self-describing result set. So ORTS returns metadata for the result set. So this part says we have an empno column. This is of type number. It has a precision of 4. We have an ename column, which is of type varchar, which has a length of 10, and so on and so on. And after the metadata section, we get the data section. And this contains one array element for each row with all the data. So this is a completely self-describing SQL result set. So what ORTS will provide is the ability, to recap this once again, we will be able to send an arbitrary SQL statement to an ORTS instance, to a special REST service, and the REST service will return a self-describing response. And based on that feature, and only on that feature, by the way, that feature will have to be enabled separately. Of course, right? So by default, this will be all disabled. Or even with the next version, it will be all disabled. You will have to enable that feature for your ORTS instance, because not everybody wants to have such a service. But when you have such a service, this is actually the replacement for the database link, right? Because you have a REST endpoint to a remote database schema. And the network protocol will then be HTTPS, hopefully HTTPS. Don't do this without SSL. And we can now send any SQL statement we want to that service. So now let's integrate that with APEX. I need the URL. And in APEX 5.2, we first have to go to shared components. And there is this ORTS. We will have something like ORTS remote databases. The details, the naming, where exactly it is in shared components, that might change until the final release, right? But there will be something like ORTS remote databases. So, and now I will create a reference to such an ORTS remote database. And that is my remote. I provide the base URL without that underscore, so that's the idea. It's just the URL denotes the ORTS instance and the schema we are pointing to. All the rest, that underscore SQL, that's ORTS-specific stuff. You don't have to bother with this. So authentication required. It's technically possible to run the SQL service without authentication. It's technically possible, but I think we all agree it wouldn't be not a good idea to do this, right? So we will use basic authentication. And just important, at least in that version, the username has to be in uppercase. Super secret password for Scott. And then we might test that. Did I enter everything? Okay, so, and that page tells us, okay, Application Express, so the URL was correct, the authentication was correct, Application Express was able to send a test SQL statement to that remote instance. So we are good to go now. The only disadvantage for that demo is, you will see, I will be able to query that remote server now, and I will be, surprise, surprise, query a totally new table AMP, right? So there is the perfect difference between local and remote. It's the same tables, but I think you can imagine what's possible with that architecture. Okay, so let's create now a classic report again. We'll start with a classic one. Let's call it AMP remote. And now we will choose a remote database. Let's take the instance we just have created. We can even use table and view. I would prefer SQL query right now. Select the name, comma, sal, hire, date. What else do we have? Job from AMP. And there was, when leaving that field, there was a bit of a lag, right? Normally it validates immediately, but it now had to validate the SQL statement remote. So I don't know who noticed it, but when leaving that field, Page Designer had half a second of a lag. It needed to do that request. Is that statement okay or not? Well, validation, of course, this all now has to happen remotely, right? And that's important to know for this. It's a remote. We are leaving, for this request, we are leaving the local Oracle database. So when creating such an infrastructure, but actually, hey, the same is true for any database link, right? Have a look on the availability, the reliability of the remote system and the network connectivity, because your application now becomes a function of that, right? If the network is down to that remote instance, that application page won't work anymore. So it's important to look after all your components. Your application, as soon as you start adding remote components to your application, but that's true for every IT system on the world, the more remote systems become a part of your application, the more, such a bad word, but actually it is so, the more unreliable becomes your application. It has to be so, right? Because the availabilities get multiplied. So let's start the page. And we see the remote table. This could also be local, of course, but actually that SQL statement has been sent to a remote database and being retrieved back. So APEX also takes the NLS setting of the local, so the APEX application has a language, of course, and if the language is Swedish or German or whatever, the APEX automatically sets the NLS environment of the remote database to make sure that all your dates come back in the right format, right? And this is available for classic reports. We also, let's create, oh, we have that time. Let's create another page with an interactive report, which allows me to give you an insight into how this is integrated into the wizards. So, and again, we have local database, we have remote database, and we have a table or SQL query. For now, we might want to go with table. And what I can see here is that the remote, the Scott user, seems to have privileges on some objects in the HR schema. Well, let's take that, why not? And then that works the same way as you know the APEX wizards, and based on the lag, when I chose the schema, when I chose the remote database, it always took half of a second to populate the list. You already noticed something is happening remote. That's my local instance on that laptop, so it had to go to VPN and to the Oracle entry point to the Oracle network, and from there to the machine where this is running on, and that explains this network lag. And then we create the interactive report. We will get more or less the same as we had before. Start the interactive report, and we have an interactive report again on remote data without a database link. And the plan is to provide that functionality with 5.2 for some of the components. We won't be able to equip all APEX components with that functionality because it's a lot of infrastructure work behind the covers. So the plan is to have read-only components, classic report, interactive report, the CSS calendar, and charts to be ready for that feature in 5.2. Forms, interactive grid, other components will have to wait a bit longer, right? But the plan, the longer term, the direction for this is, of course, that in the long end, all components in APEX will have the ability to use those remote databases. And as we will see in the afternoon, when I will be talking about REST, APEX and the rest of the world, the same infrastructure will be used then for the APEX component to access not this ORTS SQL service, which is still the Oracle world, but to access just an external RESTful services, which can be powered by any component on the world, right? Which doesn't have to be Oracle related at all. That's for the same, that all works for the same infrastructure. So in Page Designer, that looks so unspectacular, those two select lists, data source and type, but that was actually the major piece of work in, or still the major piece of work in APEX 5.2 to get this working seamlessly and having the components behave exactly as before, but using this new architecture. Make sense? Okay, so far for remote SQL and REST. I will talk about REST a bit more detailed in the afternoon. So let me just walk through the slides. That's something we have. That's what you have seen. We have created a RESTful source. We have created a report on the remote data source. When you then enable debug mode, you will be able to watch what's happening, right? And you will see that APEX generates a JSON request from the SQL, and then you see here it says, okay, I have the endpoint URL of the remote server. It posts the SQL, the JSON containing the SQL to the remote server, deserializes the response, and prepares it for the APEX component. REST services, as I said, that's for the afternoon. So, and then various miscellaneous stuff is what we plan is to revamp the REST workshop. So in SQL workshop there is the RESTful services, and the issue with the RESTful services wizards in SQL workshop is that ORTS, so actually the REST services will be executed by ORTS. We all know this, right? And ORTS, with the 3.0 version 2 years ago, ORTS introduced a new infrastructure for RESTful services. So what ORTS then introduced was a known PL/SQL interface. So there's the package ORTS, and you can offer SQL scripts to create your RESTful services. And then there is still the RESTful services section in APEX SQL Workshop. And the issue with this is both sides use different repositories. So if you use ORTS 3x and use the PL/SQL interface to create RESTful services, then the metadata is stored in an ORTS repository. If you go to SQL Workshop and use the wizards, the metadata will be stored in the APEX metadata schema. So we have two repositories, and that caused a lot of confusion for customers. And the plan, of course, it has to be the plan. We have to do it is to unify those repositories. So, of course, ORTS is the way to go. That's the repository which is developed. So if you are, that's my recommendation even for today, if you are about to work with ORTS and if you are about to create a RESTful service on top of your database, even today, my recommendation is use the PL/SQL API. Do not use this one. Do not use SQL Workshop, because that's the newer repository, that's the future repository. We will migrate this, of course, but my recommendation will be use the new one immediately. And so I think, I'm not sure whether there will be much of a difference on the visual side. It might turn out that the new REST workshop might look more or less the same as the old one looked. But behind the scenes, it will use the new auth repository, and then we won't have this issue with two auth repositories anymore. We have to, so jQuery is a very important part of APEX. So all the APEX UI components are powered by jQuery. So APEX, the jQuery library is a key component to APEX. And jQuery, in the meantime, is on version 3.x. jQuery UI is on 1.12.x. And we have to follow the jQuery path, of course. So that is, we will upgrade APEX, the jQuery libraries, to 3x and 1.12.x. Also, we will upgrade the Jet libraries to the latest version. And normally, for 95% of applications, you shouldn't notice anything from this change. So APEX, so 95% of all customers should say, okay, well, we'll be able to say, okay, APEX upgraded jQuery, so what? And you are fine with that. The only thing you might have to watch out for is when you have custom JavaScript code or when you have authored your own plugins making explicit use of jQuery code. So imagine an application, you didn't use standard APEX components, you didn't use declarative features, you coded it all yourself, right? Using that jQuery library here and that jQuery function there and here and there and there, and you have your fancy APEX page using all this stuff, right? And if you used one of the jQuery functions, which the jQuery team decommissioned, then you will have to migrate this. So if you have applications, then that's the core message for you. If you have applications with massive usage of custom JavaScript and massive usage of jQuery functions, old jQuery functions, you might have a look into these applications to make sure that they are still working when APEX has been upgraded to jQuery 3.x. That's more or less all. And there will be one harder consequence about this, and that's the mobile user interface. Is anybody using the mobile user interface for their application? One? Okay. And there will be some work for you for APEX 5.2. And that's one. So it's not a nice situation. This situation is actually bad. So, but we have to live with it. The problem with jQuery Mobile is there hasn't been any development or any real development for the jQuery Mobile framework in the last 3 years. So APEX currently uses 1.4. And I think at the beginning of 2016, the team announced an alpha version for APEX at the beginning of this year. The team released an alpha version of jQuery Mobile 1.5, which should be able to work with jQuery 3x. We don't know. It's an alpha version, and it's a real alpha version, so it had several issues. So when we looked at the fact that there hasn't been any movement in the last few years, we just have seen that alpha version and nothing since then. And most customers, when we are talking about mobile devices and different screen sizes, since APEX 5.0 is there, most customers are telling us they are using the universal theme to make their applications capable for mobile devices. And so we took the decision we have to go to jQuery 3x. jQuery Mobile is not, and that's the basic issue. The current jQuery Mobile version 1.4 does not work with jQuery 3x. It stops functioning. So we took the decision to de-support the mobile user interface with APEX 5.2. So with APEX 5.2, there will be no mobile user interface anymore. So it will work in 5.1, it will work in 5.1.3 and subsequent patch sets of 5.1, but in APEX 5.2, the mobile user interface won't work anymore. So that's what we have to do. And it's simply, Joel explains it a bit more detailed in his blog postings. So if you want to have a look, joelkalman.blogspot.com. So there is a bit more of explanation why we did this and what the situation is, to read it through again. But the baseline is just the library, the jQuery mobile library. Doesn't work with the latest jQuery library anymore. There isn't much movement from the authors of jQuery mobile, and we had to take the decision to take the mobile user interface out of Application Express 5.2. As I already said, we have Jet and jQuery upgraded to the latest version. And I think I told this, I said this in the beginning, we plan on a few new chart types, so there won't be a complete makeover of Oracle Jet in 5.2. Why? Oracle Jet is great, it works great in 5.1, but of course we will extend it, we will improve it, and we will see new chart types. So one will be the box plot, which is good to distribute data. So here is one example for the box plot chart based on the M table. So that example even doesn't show all the capabilities of a box plot chart. It's a bad example, right? So a box plot has a lower boundary, an upper boundary, and here is the actual value. And when we take a step back, this is a better example for a box plot because it has the upper, the lower, it shows the percentiles. Yeah, so a box plot is a great way to visualize data distributions. So you have a salary, you have a commission distribution, and you're not sure what does that. You have an income. You have income data. What does that income mean, right? Income data gets interesting when you compare it to the distribution. What does an income of 200,000 euros mean, right? If everybody has that, it means nothing, right? If nobody has it and you're the only one, it means a lot. And so, if you want to transport that kind of information to the end user, then box plot charts are very good suited for that because it transports the distribution. Where is that very row, that very data point? Where is it located in the distribution of all the data points? And that's what box plot charts are very suited for. I think Shakib will focus a bit more on Spotlight Search, so I won't talk too much about it. And the page designer, that's something you have seen the first signs for that in APEX 5.1, and I'm pretty sure most of you are already expecting it, right? Anybody here frequently using the legacy component view? Having it enabled in APEX 5.1 and still using it frequently? Bad news for you with APEX 5.2, it will go away. That's we even did the first steps into that direction with 5.1. So 5.1 it vanished, and then we didn't talk about it too much. We wanted the customers to ask because we also wanted to know who really wants to use the component view. Then customers asked, and then we told them, okay, go into the when you in APEX 5.1, it's still there when you not in Page Designer. So here in the preferences, there is that's APEX 5.2. So, but in APEX 5.1, there is the setting here, Enable Legacy Component View, and with that setting in APEX 5.1, you get it back. Right, but in APEX 5.2, you see, it's not there anymore, and the component view will go away. That's this point in time had to come, and with APEX 5.2, it will be the component view will be taken out. And for shared components in 5.2 will still work as before. The long-term direction for shared components is to integrate these into Page Designer as well. But this won't make it in 5.2. So in 5.2, we will have Page Designer as we have today. The legacy component view will be removed, and shared components will be pretty much the same as they are today. And I think that's it. Should be pretty much on time. Any questions? Yes, please.
With the interactive grid, we've kind of taken a lot of the interactive reports, and you integrated them also. I mean, what is the kind of future direction you see concerning this? Because it seems like some features are missing in the editable grids.
So the long-term direction for sure is that interactive grid should have the same functionality and the same capabilities as interactive report. That's the long-term direction. And at the very beginning of the cycle, we even had the ambitions to deliver that for 5.2. But we had to set, during development, priorities had to be changed a bit, and we won't make it for 5.2. So for 5.2, the interactive grid will be John invested a lot of work of improving interactive grid performance. So we got some customers telling us that rendering times of interactive grid could be improved. So that is something where John invested a lot of work on it. I didn't have a slide for interactive grid. John added a lot of minor features into interactive grid, copy down features, and something about the row height, declaration, nothing to build a slide from it. A lot of minor things to round interactive grids up to make them better and working more smooth. And what lots of customers have requested is we will get documentation for the JavaScript API. So you would know there is an interactive grid has this attribute JavaScript initialization code, which gives you the hook into a huge API to configure interactive. You can virtually do anything with your interactive grid by using that API. The only problem or the issue with that now is there is no public documentation about this anymore. So you might have a look into John Snyder's blog. John Snyder posted a lot of examples which show you how things work, but the reference is still missing, and we plan to deliver that with 5.2. So that's the development or the direction for 5.2. The functional completeness in comparison with interactive report will take a bit longer until we reach that goal. So there also in 5.2 you still won't see a migration capability interactive report to interactive grid. At this time it just doesn't make sense. Any more questions? Okay, so I hope that was helpful for you to get a feeling where APEX is heading to. Thank you for your attention. And don't know, do we have a break now or?
We have a break now.
Okay, so then enjoy the coffee. Thank you.